So last year was it was a bit of a debacle. I think that's an understatement. It sounded all great. It kicked off and fell over at the first hurdle, and really didn't recover right to the end. There was data missing. You couldn't do bulk data uploading. The platform wasn't available. They ended up extending the timelines, and I think even folks in this room got even further extensions. So they're trying to avoid that all this year. However, if you sort of read between the lines, there's early indications that it perhaps won't be as smooth again. But hopefully, with the lack of significant changes, it won't be so painful. As Andrew mentioned, there was a real shift last year into bringing everything into one integrated module, really moving to a shift to holistic reporting, and in the nicest possible ways. What CDP was trying to do is really have some joined up submissions where they could see the impact of one area was against the other. They're also quite tricky in the way that they had these interlinked questions, and I'll go into those in detail because there's a handful of them. They're actually critical if you want to get into a leadership score. So I'm going to be focusing on those modules. Sorry, the warning signs come up. Again, they've tried to align with reporting standards, and then interesting, those reporting standards have also shifted recently. They really moved away from, in previous years, you could write nice case studies and nice stories and nice narratives. They don't trust you anymore. They want to see the numbers. So they're looking for numbers. It had a lot of drop down. We're looking for facts and figures. And then again, with these interlinked questions, they were sort of cross-checking what you were saying in one part of the submission was reinforced in another part, which is quite clever. A real focus on financial information, so that was really starting to come through in big strengths. And probably the other biggest changes was these the addition of essential criteria questions, which in effect were handbrakes or hurdles. So in the past, there was this bit of a perverse outcome with CDP reporting where if a company was just doing the absolute bare minimum, they could get a better score than another organisation that was trying to tell the whole story would get negatively marked against that. So what they did is introduce these essential questions where if you weren't able to score, say, an awareness or a management score, it stopped there. You weren't able to get to an A list. And we saw that this year with some companies, as Graham mentioned previously, A listed got downgraded because they just didn't get the essential questions. And an example of that, really simple one, was if you're doing climate, your verification, if it wasn't to the appropriate verification standard, or perhaps in one case, no names to protect the guilty, but instead of, say, having 95% of your scope 1s or scope 2 covered in your verification statement, this particular company had less than 20%. They've been an A-lister for many years, and guess what? They're now a B, because they just missed that essential criteria. We told them it was going to happen, but they didn't remedy it. So integrated questions. As you all know, that you've got your climate, your water, your forestry, and your other modules there. What I'm going to focus on today is actually the module 1 to 6 primarily, because you could have the best climate submission, but if you're not dealing with these modules, you're not going to get a leadership score. So it is really, truly integrated. So as I mentioned before, these interlinked questions are really, they really become critical questions. So, and there's a handful of them, and I think we'll share these slides, won't we? But yeah, these are the ones you're going to need to really focus on this year to get the best possible score you can. And the first one, and it was so simple, is this timeline question at 2.1, where it's asking what's your short, what's your medium, and what's your long-term time frames. Right? Simple enough, yeah? However, in CDP scoring speak, they're quite particular on how you report that. So short term is 0 to 2, and then you think logically, well, then medium will be 2 to whatever next period. Well, no, not in CDP speak. You have to use the next number up. So 0 to 2, 3 to 9, and then 10 onwards. And a lot of businesses didn't get that right. Yeah. and straight away you're losing valuable points. Now, it's 1 or 2 points here, but later on in the submission when they're asking about your target setting, your timelines, your strategy, it all links back to this 2.1. So it's such a simple thing to do, and I know people say, well, that's not logical, but it's CDP speak. That's the first one to look out for. The next one is this question here, and it's perhaps the most critical question in the whole CDP. It's 2.2.2, easy one to remember. It's like a third of 666, but the devil is in the detail, pun intended. This one is looking at, are you truly integrating your thinking, your risk management, your modelling, how frequently your board looks at environmental issues, how regular that is, what tools and methodologies you're using, and they're looking at that across those 3 core disciplines, so the climate, the forestry and the water. And getting that right sets you up for subsequent modules. And also later in the scoring, the questions will refer back to this. Have you got full management points in this question? If you haven't, it's an essential question. You're not going any further. You're not going to get a leadership score. So super critical. Devil's in the detail here, and this is where we'll look at it when we're doing your score checks, is that there's lots of drop-down menus. So it's pretty straightforward to click most of the boxes. Right? It's what you're clicking and what you're saying that really counts. So for example, you might say one of the ways we look at risk is we get an external consultant in, like an IMS, or we do our own desktop reviews internally. That's not going to get you any scores. What they want to know is what kind of assessment. Was it a WRI aqueduct assessment? Was it an RCP type assessment? They want to see the tools and the methodologies you're using. So that's the nuances of the devil in the detail. One of the... Yeah.
It's very similar to what we do in double materiality assessment. It's kind of this impacts, risks analysis, and then DMA is an outcome of that. But is the double materiality assessment according to EFRAG methodology is one of the right answers that can bring you up in the scoring?
Yeah, I can't remember because there's so many different options. We'd have to have a look at it. But I mean, Victoria, you might have a view on that. Is double materiality one of the... Helen?
It's the double materiality, part of double materiality, depending on what you look at, it would be kind of the sub-level. So double materiality is the top-down bit, it's kind of the next level down. So say you've identified water as a material topic, but then to do a further analysis of what you need to do a WI aqueduct assessment to look at kind of where your dry areas might be. So it could be an element of it, but it's more likely to be kind of the drilled down specific underlying assessments that you then do to kind of expand your understanding.
Okay, so it's more about how do you, what is your performance and what is your methodology against each material topic rather than how you did your assessment.
Yeah, and it depends what length your assessment has gone to, but it's more likely that would be the kind of top-down engagement process to understand which areas you need to focus on in more depth, and then you do a kind of much more in-depth assessment to understand climate-related risk or water-related risk or biodiversity, kind of trying to look at the AI tools that are kind of looking at deforestation in the areas that you work and that kind of thing, and that's the kind of tool that they're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
So they're looking for evidence that you've done something rather than the full detail. Is that it?
They're looking for kind of the methodologies. There's a lot that, so TNFD, for example, has a whole list of different kind of tools that you can use to assess risk. So they're kind of trying to see what depth you've gone into to really understand your risks and opportunities. So for climate, it'll be kind of, have you done a scenario analysis? Have you looked at specific scenarios? Are they recognised scenarios that other people have used? The NGFS scenarios, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, it's not okay, but I get you.
But there is, the good news is that there is a massive long list, so I think, and there's kind of other options. So if you don't necessarily tick an exact box, you can kind of go into further detail about what you have done, which if you kind of tick the right boxes in that way, then you can get the points. It was all devils in the detail.
But it's certainly an area, when we'll be doing a score check this year, we'll be really looking at this one and making sure we're squeezing every last point out. and perhaps them coming back and challenge you. You know, when you've said this, what do you mean that? You know, that kind of thing. One of the key takeaways from last year is that and different businesses approach it different ways. Some answered this: one row for climate, one row for forest, one row for water, and they had different tools and governance mechanisms and oversights and such. Those organisations that just did one row for all three environmental, forestry, water, climate, and then ticked all the appropriate boxes for the different things they did, end up getting better scores. So one of the takeaways is if you can put it all into one table, you've got a better chance of getting the maximum points. So next one is around risk and opportunities, and this is where we saw a lot of businesses not do as well as they have in previous years. And it's one of these old adages that less is more. So, you may have multiple, say, opportunities that you're currently exploring, and likewise with multiple risks that you're looking to manage and mitigate. With CDP, the scoring criteria is called one row scored. So what they do is they randomly pick one, or the computer randomly picks a row, and they score just that. So if you had 2 really good risk case studies, and then 4 weaker ones, the odds are you're going to get the weak one chosen, and you're going to lose points. Right? So again, that's one of the things we go through with our feedback is we'll look at, ideally you want to do 2, maybe 3 risks, 2, 3 opportunities, really, really solid ones. You may have 20 projects, but don't list them all. Just the ones that will give you the maximum points.
Is there any minimum requirement? So this isn't going to be a very helpful question because I can't remember specifically which question it was about, but I remember going through the scoring methodology afterwards, and I think we might have lost marks because we answered 1 row for climate, 1 row for water, and they wanted 2 for climate, 2 for water. And it might have been my understanding of the scoring methodology, but does that exist?
There is one a climate question where you have to have two rows, and that's where you're doing a 1.5 degree pathway reduction and using a chronic measurement tool like an RCP 4.5. So there is one question that has that. For the others, you can just have one. Yeah. Whew, you put me on my toes there. Bring out my inner geek now. Here we go. So these were the real critical ones, 3.1, 3.2, 3.6, but basically this is where they're looking for the financial numbers, linking to your business, linking to your environment issues, and what are you doing about it. So for those who have done double materiality, TFCD or whatever, you've got these sort of numbers in place. For a lot of businesses, it was the first year they got exposed to it, and they really struggled. So in terms of strategically addressing this in the longer term, we're encouraging people to get onto this now, start working it. Real common errors here that we saw and is where people just weren't able to give a number, or if they did, they didn't give a financial breakdown. So what the scoring criteria does is ask you for a formula. Right? And you need to put that in, even if it's something as simple as, well, this is 10% of $1 million. Right? Do a formula like this. You need that to get the point. And then the other thing, this is where this interlinked questions, what it does is that when you talk about these sorts of these investments and CapEx and OpEx and the time frames, they're going to go check, is those time frames the same as the short, medium and long term that you've mentioned previously? Because that's that interlinked. So you can't talk about, well, our medium term, and then you say in the next 15 years, where you've recorded previously, your medium is say 3 to 9 years. You'll lose those points. So that's where they're starting to look at this joined up thinking. You're saying in one area is the same as the other. And it's really down this granular details around cost calculation. So they want to understand how you calculated the figure you've put in there, how you measure success, and an explanation of those costs. So this is where, whilst we say they've moved away from narrative is really critical in these pieces. You need to spell out how you got there. Module 4 really focused on good governance and leadership, and what CDP is doing is they're really wanting to see is the board and the governance element, are they really engaged in environmental issues? Have they got skin in the game? So this is the 10% rule. So they want to see on the board, are people's remuneration packages linked directly to performance against environmental issues? And they're looking for at least 10% of the board members to have some sort of monetary link to that success. Right? So if you've got 10 board members, at least one of them needs to have some skin in the game in terms of financial risk to their package. The other area where we see they're looking for the board oversight, and then they're looking for the executive execution against the plan, and they're looking for the interrelations of that. So there's a couple of questions that are strongly linked to each other. Where a common error is that you might have someone who might be your environmental officer or sustainability manager, but they don't sit on the board, and companies put them in at the board level, right? Saying, well, this person's responsible for these 3 or 4 elements of our net zero strategy. That's going to lose you a massive amount of points. So it needs to be a C-suite level. They need to be reporting directly to the board or sitting on the board itself to get those points. Later on in the management section, you can talk about those people, but then they need to be reporting to, guess what? A board member. Right? So again, they're looking for that joined up thinking. And the other area where we saw points being lost is around the links of your initiatives. Are they against aligned with environmental standards? So whether it's aligned with the Paris Agreement, so not necessarily SBTI, it's science-based targets. You know, it's aligned with the 1.5 degree pathway. Is it aligned with the Montreal Agreement on forestries? Is it aligned with sustainability goal 6 against water? So they're looking for those policies linked to these international best practices, and then are you putting that out in a transparent manner? Are they on public registries of some type? So that often got a bit of thinking going as, you know, we put it in our sustainability report, but where else are we putting that that's going to have that level of transparency? And again, this is all around what CDP are really challenging is around this good governance and leadership. Are they walking the talk? Have they got skin in the game? Are they publicly stating that? And can they be challenged on it? So business strategy, module 5, this again is around, that's where a lot of organisations did struggle last year because they didn't necessarily have those numbers in behind, but it's all around the metrics. They're looking for really robust modelling and an analysis of what the cost impact is to a business against its its environmental issues, the trajectory, how much they're investing in that, what kind of scenario analysis have they used, and where we saw a lot of submissions really struggle with is around they weren't able to provide a financial breakdown of the investment and the metrics, being able to talk what success is, and that could be something as simple as we're carrying out this initiative and we aim to have 30% of our tier 1 suppliers doing X. You just be able to define what success is. And then probably the last big one is this around these corporate value chain, so supply chain engagement. What does that look like? How much you're engaged with? What percentage of your tier 1 are you engaged with? How do you deal with non-conformance? How do you keep the ones that are non-conforming? How do you get them to change their behaviour? So they're looking for those sorts of metrics around success. And then module 6 was a real simple one. If you remember doing your submission, it's probably the one you go, oh, this is great, this is going to take me about 10 seconds. You could just say, I'm doing operational control, or I'm doing equity, or financial control. How am I measuring? So this is where, again, we saw some French companies have a struggle a little bit where they might be doing operational control for, say, climate, but doing equity for water. And so straight away you're going to lose a whole lot of points. They want to see just use one standard across all three. Yeah. And the other thing is they'll check back, again, in the earlier part of the section is they sort of cross-check this one. So the key takeaway is, choose operational, choose financial. Is it aligned with your calendar year, your business year? Is it the same? And use the same across all three disciplines. And then lastly, again, really simple, who's signing off the report? So come back to that earlier module on governance and leadership. They want to see a C-suite member of the leadership team signing off the submission. And so that's another one we picked up quite a bit with score checking, is that it's someone's done all the hard work. It might be the environmental team, and the environmental manager signs it off. Well, that's not going to get you the maximum points. You need your CEO, CFO, member of the board. You've got a selection there, but it needs to be at that level to get the full scores. And the other area here was around any other verifications that you had. So in addition to you're getting your emissions inventory verified, are there any other work that you've done? As an opportunity for you to shine as well, to put those up onto the platform.